So the issue that this cycle action addresses is pretty basic, and there's an argument going on in my head that says, well, you can just do this manually with a few clicks. Why do you have to automate it? The reason is that I think I'm trying to reduce the amount of mouse clicks going on. Part of that is I have a kind of injury in my left shoulder, which makes mousing quite painful after a long day. So a lot of the cycle actions that I think I come up with are to reduce the amount of mousing that I do. So if I can turn a long, drawn-out process of clicking the mouse into one keystroke, I will. That's generally why I'm creating these cycle actions. Also, just because I'm interested to see if logically you can think through the steps and come up with the solution that you want. So if I want to render the contents of this folder, the green folder, number 2, and get rid of the child tracks because everything's fine in there. There's nothing really going on the child tracks. Say there's no plugins, there's no routing, they're not being routed anywhere. The only routing I got is I'm sending to the aux track from folder 2. So I am sending, for example, if there's a reverb on here, let's put a reverb on. Say I'm wanting to send these tracks or this folder into the reverb. When I bounce this audio down, if I do that now, what happens is it bounces the time selection or renders the time selection. Any items within this time selection will be rendered to one stereo stem, and the routing that's sending to the aux will remain, which is great. But there's a couple of things that don't happen, which I like to happen. One of them is the original folder is still there. So I have to delete that folder because we're done with that now. We don't need the 12 EQ plugins that are on that folder. It's all been rendered to audio. So all those plugins, all that processing is now in a stereo stem, committed, done. It's very old school. Some people don't like doing that because you can't go back. I would argue it's sometimes quite good practice to commit your decisions and stick with what you've done. It depends what kind of project you're working on. If you have a client that's at the other end of the phone asking for changes a lot, then this is not the way to go, probably because you can't go back to version 2.1 that the client really liked because you've burnt your bridges. So this is a kind of destructive process and irreversible in some ways, but it suits certain situations. So one thing it doesn't get rid of the original folder. So I'm going to delete that. Delete 1 track and 3 child tracks. Yes. The other thing that happens is when it makes a stem, when Reaper makes a stem, we always end up with this stem suffix, which I want to delete because I just don't like it. The other thing that I like to do here on the item is to remove the silences. So I dynamic split the silence. And I've got remove silent areas checked, split. So now I just have the audio items, the clips that I've rendered and nothing in between. So I don't end up with one big audio file. When I go to save, if I look at the directory cleanup, then somewhere in here is the original stem, so it will delete the original audio. So again, if you clean up your project directory after doing this kind of activity, you're going to lose your original audio. So be aware of that risk. The other thing that happens is, so I like to, let me just put in a bunch of tracks. Now, if I make that into a folder, and call it blue, and I make that into a folder, and I call it green, and I make that into a folder, I'm going to call it yellow, and I make this into a folder, and I'm going to call it, let's call it brown. So here we have folders, children, folders, children, folders, children, folders, children, folders, children, and then there's our new stem, which was a folder and is now a stereo stem. Now I like to toggle between everything expanded and everything compacted. So there's blue folder, green folder, yellow folder, brown folder, folder one, and then where's our new stereo stem? Well, if I expand all the folders, there's our new stereo stem number 2. Yeah. And so this is a problem which is only really relevant to me or you if you like to use this workflow of compacting and expanding your folders for a kind of quick overview. So I like to be able to have, if I end up with a dozen folders, I can just see what they're doing. So it's similar to groups and VCAs, but it's working in a different way because obviously I can add processing to the folders, which affects all the tracks, which is my preference. So the solution then is to add a new track and then drag 2 into this new track, which creates another folder. So we're going to call this folder new 2. So now when I compact, I end up with blue, green, yellow, brown, folder number 1, and new 2, which is the folder that contains the new stem. There's our new stem, so we're going to call this new stem. So that's the landing point that I like to get to when I'm doing this action. So you can see there is new 2 with the new stem. So this is the rendered audio from the original folder, and the original 3 child tracks are all bounced into this stem, and I've put it in a new folder so that I can move between compact and expanded view. All my folders and my child tracks. So I have a cycle action which automates this process and reduces the amount of mouse work that I have to do. So let's have a look at it. So as you can see, the items from the original child folders have gone, and we're left with an audio item on a new child track in our new folder. There are a couple of plugins on the new folder, and we had to do a little manual work to tidy up the track names. Personally, I really like this solution as it does exactly what I need, but your needs might be a little different. I'm hoping that by talking you through the steps of this cycle action, you might see how using a similar set of principles might match your own needs and make your workflow a little easier and faster. So firstly, we save our current track selection, which is the folder track that we have selected to render. Next, we select all the items in the child tracks and use them to define the time selection that we want to render. This avoids rendering the whole length of the project and should save you a little time in the long run. Now, with our time selection sorted, we restore our save track selection, which is the folder track, and render that to a stereo stem. Note that this action by default preserves the routing of your sends. We are going to cut these sends so we can paste them onto another track later on. Now we duplicate the track, which is the stereo stem that we've just rendered. So we now have two rendered stereo stems of the original folder track. Select previous track, keeping current track selection, and this means that we have now got both of our new tracks selected. Now we make a folder from our selected tracks. Here's a cool XRAIM script that allows us to trim the annoying stem suffix from each track. So we tab through 1, 2, 3, type in the number 6, tab again, and hit space so it doesn't add a 0 to the beginning of the name, and then we hit enter. We now restore saved track selection. This puts the focus onto the parent track of the folder. Now we can use a couple of console actions to insert whatever plugins we like here onto the parent track. We close all floating FX windows to get them out of the way. Now another cool XRAIM script which makes the parent tracks uppercase and the child tracks lowercase, so I can see more easily which is parent and child. Now we select the parent track again, and here we paste in our sends that we cut earlier. This restores any routing that we had going on from the parent track. As a sidebar here, if you have important routing going on within your child tracks, then this whole cycle action will not preserve any routing from your child tracks. There's another cycle action that I have for that, which is in a video called Render All Children. Now we still have two sets of rendered stems on both tracks, so we are going to select the items on the folder track and remove those items. Then we go to the next track and go to the next track again, which selects the original folder that we rendered out in the first place and remove those tracks. Next, we restore saved track selection back to the new parent. We select our child track and clear the FX chain for that track. Now we select all items on the child track and dynamic split, removing any unwanted silence in the rendered stem. You will want to have set up your dynamic split to your own settings, but here's a quick snapshot of my settings. And that's it. I'd love to hear what you think, so please do leave a comment. Let me know if I've done anything wrong or could do things more elegantly. And if you have a similar problem that needs a cycle action solution, let me know, because this is definitely one of my favorite things to do in Reaper, coming up with needlessly complicated and overly specific custom actions that only have meaning or utility to me and about 5 other humans. Thanks for watching. I'll see you again soon.